Okay, at the top of the agenda is discuss the GSOC coverity idea.
Yeah, I posted that as a GSOC project to try and go through coverity and do analysis there. I mean, some of the cases are probably complex, but the grand majority are probably simple, and a student could probably handle them and also fix them. The challenges that we have in Coverity is that we have kind of two things. Synopsys, this is a company that owns Coverity. They have they do scans for open source project, and they kind of give free their software, which is the scanner and also all the web UI and database and whatever that kind of manages the issues. And it's pretty easy to use that. It has a great API and, or I mean, a great UI, and you can mark the different issues, like if they're false positives, or you're going to fix them, and document the trackers and run queries if you want to kind of narrow down only, let's say, on RGW issues and so on. So this is very easy. The problem is that we don't control anything there. So they run it, I don't know exactly when and on which version. So which means that the feedback loop is kind of problematic. So you could be fixing something, but the issue would remain there because it's not necessarily that they're going to run that in a timely manner on the new version. So this is one thing. The other thing is that we're running on, I think in the Ceph lab, Caleb did that. I'm not sure if he's on the call. So Caleb created a setup where we run Coverity tool, and we just post the results into a static web page. And this is done, I don't know how often, but pretty often. Sorry?
One runs every day on the main.
Okay. Okay, so that gives you pretty excellent feedback on new issues and on issues that you fix and so on. Kind of the problem there is the output is a static web page, so you cannot mark anything like as a false positive, or and also filtering issues according to all kind of criteria is I mean, it's not really possible. You can do a search on RGW and hope that you'll find all RGW issues. Also, they do have like a severity or impact level, and usually you want to look at the high and sometimes medium level, because the low level are usually not worth addressing. And this is also not possible with the static, because I don't think that even appears in the HTML output that's in the static web page. What I found out is that, and this is actually, I think it's good regardless of whether we're using the web UI or the static web page, is that there's a way to annotate the code to ignore issues. So I think this is better because this really gives us full control on what we think is false positive, and we're not at the mercy of some database owned by some other company, Synopsys in this case, to store all the information. And like, who knows, maybe in the future they'll decide, oh, and we actually, we're not giving this free service for Ceph. So if we put that in the code, we can continue to use Coverity, and even with a static web page, it should be okay, because at least the false positive would go away. So, well, what I wanted to kind of raise here for discussion is, which path are we going to take? Maybe just one comment. A couple of months back, when we started to use Coverity, or when I started to use Coverity, I ran into the issues, and of course, there are lots of false positives and so on and so forth, but there were at least a couple of real bugs that were found. So real meaningful bugs that were found. There's also a bunch of things that are not exactly bugs, but were worthwhile fixing. So I would say that in spite of the fact that we have lots of false positives, the tool is useful. And I would suggest to continue to use it, because even if there are even if it's 1 to 10 ratio of false positive to real issues, then you find real crashes and real bugs through the tool. So it's worthwhile. Yeah. So as I said, what I want to raise here for discussion is kind of, can we agree on a direction? Do we want to continue to use the web UI, or do we want to go for the static option combined with the code annotation that kind of at least would clear the false positives?
I have no problem with code annotations.
Okay. Now, maybe another thing that we may do, but that would probably require more work, is that I don't know, maybe Caleb knows, there's also, on top of creating HTML output from the tool, you can create JSON output from the tool. And I wasn't sure, but maybe the JSON output could be more useful for at least filtering or creating separate static pages, let's say for RGW versus OSD versus some other component. So
that's interesting. So I mean, once we get most of the false positives ironed out, it could be interesting to have something that automatically opens tracker issues for new coverity reports, and the JSON format might be more scriptable for that.
yeah, I'm not sure we should do anything automatic, because even if you have a new issue, somebody will have to go and look first before you open the tracker.
So what kind of, at the process level, what kind of, who's going to be scanning the output and figuring out which issues are important or not?
I mean, as part of the GSOC project, it will be the student that does that. But generally speaking, I'm not sure. I mean, ideally, I don't know if this is possible. Ideally, there could be like opening trackers automatically. I don't think that's a good idea, but maybe like I'm not sure how long does it take to run the coverity scan. Kelly, do you know how much time it takes?
It's not terribly long. It's like, I don't know, 45 minutes or something, maybe an hour, on the order of an hour.
Okay. So, and I think what you said is that the tool itself doesn't require a license, right? It's just that the web UI requires a license.
No, the analyze needs to be on the Red Hat intranet so that it can reach the license server.
Oh, okay. So we can't really. So it doesn't run in the Sapia lab, right? You just put the results in the Sapia lab.
I tried to run it. I thought it would run there. I was mistaken.
Oh, okay. So you just put the results there.
I just upload the results there. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Then process-wise, I don't see any option. Like we cannot put it as part of like a tutorial job or something that anyone can run, or we can or say that we're going to run that whenever we have like a baseline for a release or something like that, because we cannot really run that upstream. So I guess the only thing I can think of is that we publish the results upstream. Maybe we can build some tool that would make it easier to, I mean, a manual tool, but would make it easier to open a tracker based on the issue that somebody decides is it's a true issue. But I'm not sure. I mean, if the tool can only run in a licensed environment, then I don't know exactly what we can do there. I mean, we cannot run it in Tautology or in Jenkins or anything.
So taking Ceph's telemetry as an example, there's a separate telemetry.ceph.io mailing list that gets a daily report of all of the unique crashes. So maybe something like that could report on whether there are new issues.
Okay.
I mean, if we're storing the JSON output somewhere, then we could have a cron job that runs and scans that and potentially opens tracker issues, but that could be discussed kind of as a later stage thing.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, when it comes to the student, there's no much process to put in place. It's just that he'll do as much cleanup as he can and fix the issues and annotating the code, the false positive. So we don't care, like whether we have the web UI or our own runs. If it's in the code, it's in the code. And I guess once it's done, then we can see what we're facing, like how much issues we have there, and whether it's worthwhile kind of building some kind of an automation system around that.
Yep, that sounds like a great way for the GSAC participant to get started.
Yeah. Okay.
And I agree with your sentiment that static analysis is really helpful. So I want all that we can get.
Yes. Okay, thanks. That's all what I had about that.
All right, next on the agenda is related to RGW obj manifest. There's been some discussion on Preetha's PR about the D3N filter, which I'll link in the agenda. So the question there was whether the object manifest should be private to the backend or not. And Dan, you suggested that it should be pretty easy to hide it that way.
Yeah,
There are only a
so
couple of things depending on it now.
it used to be in the API, and I did actually do explicit work to remove it from the API. And I thought that had been it, but I had missed the uses of it, pulling it out of the attribute. Looking at the uses of the attribute, it looks like there's only two actual use cases for it. One is to check for Cloud S3, and the other is to get a decryption filter. So we probably want an API to do decryption filtering anyway. So that's probably good. And we do have APIs related to S3 Cloud transition. So there's precedent for adding one to check if this object is intended for cloud transition. So it would be, I think, pretty easy to fix these last couple use cases so that it's completely below the line.
Okay. So a zipper object API to check if it's cloud transitioned would just look at the manifest, but inside of the Rados backend.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think first pass of the encryption or the decryption filter would be pretty specific, but we may want to consider doing something more generic with encryption and decryption anyway. Once we have that in place and we can look at it and see, oh yeah, really, that's a more generic problem than this specific getting rid of this RGW obj manifest.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to refresh my memory on what I think it's the decrypt filter that needs the manifest, what exactly it needs there. For compression, we also have to store like the compression blocks, but that's in an attribute of its own. So it might make sense to convert the decryption stuff into its own attribute, but
yeah, that would be interesting.
Word compat. All right. And I mean, if the intent is that nothing above RGW app can access this, is there something we should do special with the RGW adder manifest? Or I guess we can just hide the object manifest type behind the Rados backend, so RGW app wouldn't know how to decode.
I mean, that was my plan. Yeah, was to just put the object manifest type inside the Rados store. I expect that backends will want to be able to add attributes that are specific to their backend. I don't necessarily see that as a problem, so I think it's probably okay to have the attribute there anyway. Although, if we take out these last two uses, maybe we don't need that attribute at all. I don't know. I'd have to check and see if it's being used inside Rados store itself.
Well, right, when Rados store reads a head object, it has to decode it out of that attribute, but it could potentially hide it from the levels above, but I don't know if it's worth doing that.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have a problem with store specific attributes. You just won't be able to decode them outside the store.
The only issue with store specific attributes I can think of is what multi-site sync would do with them if it's syncing an object to a different backend. But I think there will be a lot of other issues like that, trying to abstract multi-site.
Yeah.
All right, and we have Preetha on the call. Anything about your D3N filter that you want to discuss?
Not right now, Casey. I was just going through your comment and trying to understand that as to how I should go about that get object iterate call. So yeah, I don't have anything specific to ask. I'm just trying to understand how the D3N filter itself can iterate through an object. So probably next time I might have more questions. Not right now.
All right, and we can follow up on the discussion in the PR too.
Yeah.
All right, any other thoughts before we move on? All right, next topic is Ali's.
Yeah, I really don't have much here, but I know downstream with Red Hat and IBM, we do have a customer that would like the results of sync status to be something they can export and visualize in Prometheus. I'm looking through the issue they raised, and there is this tracker issue from many years ago. I think somewhere in the depths of your memory. Casey, you might recognize it. I guess it seems like we need to, I mean, if we're going to pursue this line of work, it seems like we're going to need to flesh out what exactly it would be we'd want to send out to Prometheus. That's one aspect of it, but the other aspect of it is actually making some kind of cache for these, I'm going to guess. I don't know, Casey, now that you know a little bit more about the labeled capabilities we've added, and taking a look at that issue, I'm wondering if you might have any idea what at least the high level gaps are or things we would need to work on if this becomes a project.
Okay. So, right, initially I thought you were just talking about the existing multi-site sync counters that we have.
I need to actually take some time and understand what those do too. But I'm gonna guess that there must be a gap here between those existing sync counters and whatever's in that tracker issue and probably what the IBM customer wants.
Okay. Yeah, so I do remember discussing in the context of this dashboard project, kind of the challenges of presenting counter-like information or presenting multi-site sync status specifically in terms of counters like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like what an admin would want to know most is like how far behind sync is, how many
Yeah.
objects are left to sync, how much
Yeah.
time it's going to take, and that's
Mhm.
information that we can't really calculate for them. And so, I don't know. I think it's a hard problem.
Okay.
The,
I mean, I figured given the lack of specifics so far, it is a hard problem. I was hoping Matt would be on this call, but I forgot that he's probably busy in New York. I know he had some thoughts on this area, but they were pretty general from what I remember.
Okay. So, I'm looking through this tracker issue, and I did describe what admin APIs we have to expose sync status information. So
Mhm.
a REST client could potentially generate the same information that the Rados GW admin sync status command can,
Mhm.
but it would still be hard to present that in a useful way in Prometheus, at least in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, the conclusion you had about the admin wanting to know how behind sync is, it seemed to be what Matt was thinking too, but I just wanted to put this on you and this group's radar as something that I want to at least look into a little more over the next couple weeks to see if there's something
Right.
to do
So
there.
for each log shard, we can figure out like the timestamp of the latest entry that we haven't sunk yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could potentially do like a graph of just time delta for each shard. And
Mm-hmm.
that might be a useful view, but it won't, I mean, you'd have to like extrapolate based on the slope of that to figure out how long it's going to take for everything to catch up.
Yeah.
But thinking about it, it's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll keep that in mind. I'll read that tracker issue in detail and take a look at the current sync counters as well. I think that labeled PR should get merged sometime soon. I know it was running through the Rados suite the last time I checked. But I know you wanted to add labels to the sync counters as well, the sync related ones as well. But yeah, that's it for this topic.
All right, great. Any other thoughts, Shilpa or Somya, maybe on the multi-site side?
Isn't something like how many objects they are the secondary or whatever Rados gateways behind from the primary sort of enough to display? Or do you or is it expected that we need some kind of an ETA of when all the objects will be synced?
Well, in the replication logs, we can potentially count how many log entries we haven't applied yet, but there isn't an easy way to say how many objects that is, and the only way to count all the log entries is to actually read all of them, which I think is too expensive to do.
Right.
For full sync, I think something counts the number of objects. Maybe it's only metadata full sync. It counts how many objects ahead of time and then tracks its progress through that, but it's only for full sync.
Okay. Yeah.
Also, Casey, I'm not sure, are there counters to check how many objects the sync thread has processed versus how many objects are actually synced to check if you are going in a loop?
The existing perf counters for multi-site do distinguish between successful object sync and not modified errors, which means we're trying to fetch an object that we already have.
Okay. Okay.
Jane, have you guys at Bloomberg had any discussions about multi-site observability that would fit into this?
It appears Jane's unmuted, but I don't hear anything. She has to be unmuted. I'm not sure how that's possible.
Yeah, looks unmuted to me. Unfortunately.
No. Jane, do you want to try jumping on and off again as a try? I know before you join the meeting, there's some place to test your mic.
All right, well, in the meantime, let's go ahead with Caleb's topic. This looks like in response to my review feedback on loadable modules.
Yep. I don't really have a lot to say here except that it's kind of a big it's a pretty big change. It's not, and I need to learn about unique pointers and this using syntax. So I don't know whether, it would be better to have somebody like Dan that already knows this stuff. See, Dan is on the call. So, or that notwithstanding, it's not that I object. I don't have any objection to it. It's just a pretty big change because the driver, if we make the driver a unique pointer, and there's uses all over the place, so it's not a 2 or 3 line fix or change is all. I'm not sure what else there is to say about it really, other than I just wanted to run it by you and Dan.
Yeah, I mean, making those functions return unique pointers should be pretty easy. You just have them return make unique. But you're right. Anytime we pass the driver into something else, which happens all over the place, those all need to be modified. So it'll be, 1,000-line changes or something like that.
So a first step, we could have the sal drivers return a unique pointer, but then when we store it in app main, we would release the pointer, release ownership to app main, and its destructor would delete it as it currently does. I think app main itself would be a reasonable place to store it as a unique pointer, and then it could expose it to the rest of RGW as a raw pointer without requiring any other changes.
Okay.
Yeah, possibly. I think maybe this should be let's see. Oh, it looks like it might be okay. It looks like it's done through a getter anyway, so that should be pretty easy. I think this might be something that we do post or separately from the module work.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
All right,
That's fine with me. Yeah,
I'll make sure it gets added to my list.
okay. Thanks. Looks like Jane's back. I don't know if
Any luck, Jane? I haven't heard anything yet. Okay, well, if you guys have thoughts on this, you're welcome to share them on the upstream dev list.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't hear you, Jane.
All right, no problem. So any other topics for the call? All right, let's end it here then. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.